I don't know more and the true meaning of words. That is the topic of tonight's Byline. Just when you thought it might be safe to go back in the water. Well, protests started up again today. If you thought I don't know more had petered out, well, you're wrong. The movement's been given new life and a fresh injection of big labor to tie all those First Nations grievances together with other assorted grievances of the left. This makes incredible sense when you remember that I told you several weeks ago now that at its leadership level, I don't know more is a movement of the radical left. Well, this new group, this new movement is called Common Causes. It's got the backing of union leaders from across the country. This truly is the resurrection of the Occupy movement. Here's how they describe themselves on their website. Quote, Common Causes is an assembly of social movements dedicated to defending democracy, the environment, and human rights. In keeping with the values of the significant majority of peoples who reside in Canada, Quebec, and on Indigenous lands, we provide alternatives to the current Conservative government's agenda. Now, look, I could focus on the protest and what they'll be doing. I could focus on who these people are or that this is just an outright opposition to the Harper agenda. But instead, I want to focus on their language because language tells you so much. Look at what they said in that paragraph. In keeping with the values of the significant majority of peoples who reside in Canada, Quebec, and on Indigenous lands. I'm sorry, I thought we all lived in Canada, but no, they separate Canada from Quebec and Indigenous lands from the rest of it. This isn't a mistake. This is how these people think. This is something they've been pushing for decades. It started on the fringe, and now it's in the mainstream, and that should be worrying. On the weekend, the Ontario Liberal Party elected a new leader, Kathleen Wynne, and we'll talk about her and her policies later in the program, but listen to how she opened her speech at the Liberal Convention in Toronto.
Thank you. So which team has sizzle? I'd like to acknowledge that we are holding this grand gathering on the territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit.
This is the former Minister of Education and now the Premier of the biggest province in the country, claiming she's standing on the land of the Mississaugas of the New Credit. Well, a little history lesson for you here, Kathleen. The Mississaugas of the New Credit sold the land that is now Toronto in 1787. Now, in 1805, there was a dispute over the original deal and what it encompassed. And the government of the day came to a settlement with the Mississaugas of the New Credit. And just over 2 years ago, in 2010, there was a settlement, including a $145 million payment, partially for what's called the Toronto Purchase, the one that happened in 1787. The Mississaugas of the New Credit now live out by Lake Erie near a town called Hagersville on a functional reserve. They sold that land more than 200 years ago, but Kathleen Wynne says it's theirs. Is she unthinking? Is this just political posturing? I'm not sure, but I do know this is the fashionable thing to do. All the Liberals are doing it. The federal Liberals did it at their debate in Vancouver the week before.
I would like to introduce to you Councillor Alroy Baker of the Squamish First Nation, on whose territory, traditional territory, today's debate is being held. And I would like to present Councillor Baker with the traditional gift of tobacco.
That was Mike Crawley, president of the Liberal Party of Canada, once upon a time a bigwig in the Ontario Liberal Party, saying, hey, we're on the Squamish territory. Now, either these people do not mean what they say or they believe they're actually standing on First Nations land, unceded First Nations land, still owned by them, which makes everyone else squatters. Now, in the case of Vancouver and the Squamish, there is a land claim that's going on. Negotiations haven't been settled, but if these federal Liberals get in, they've already given up. They've said they side with the Squamish. So, well, what's there left to negotiate? We hear this in Ottawa all the time. Politicians of the left especially open up news conferences on Parliament Hill by saying, I'm standing on Algonquin land. So if our elected leaders are speaking like this, if they also accept the language that says we need to negotiate nation to nation, should we be surprised that some Native leaders believe that and then want action on it? Words have meaning. What Kathleen Wynne and other Liberals are saying is that Canada, all of Canada, is native land. Not that it was once native land and now we all live together. Not that, hey, we're a big nation of immigrants all sharing the land with the native population. No. Her words mean that this is and always was native land and will be in the future, even after you sell it 225 years ago. Now we have Liberals like Bob Rae signing on to the idea that there are hundreds of sovereign First Nations across the country. That would mean they're outside of Canadian land. He won't tell you that directly. His words, that's what they mean, but he won't tell you that directly, just like Kathleen Wynne won't tell you what her words mean. To them, it's about striking the right progressive pose. But I'll say it again, words have meaning. And so while people march, chant, and blockade, pay attention to what is said by the protesters and the politicians that embrace them, because eventually there will be consequences that come with those words. And that's the byline.